YouTuber. That's
You say what?
You went to working with a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So now you're working with a YouTuber, right?
Shit, I mean,
you're forgetting to realize that I will be the first boxer and promoter ever in the Hall of Fame for multiple reasons. Like,
the big question here is, that rematch versus Gervonta. All that kept on going back and forth. It was supposed to happen in August. It didn't happen. Then now his exhibition fight. So where's that slate leave us right now? You think we're gonna get that rematch fight versus Gervonta after this fight?
Who knows? He said he's retiring. I believe him. Honestly, I think he's scared. So if he's going to retire, I believe he's going to retire.
You think you'll retire after the exhibition match?
I think so.
Why do you say that?
Because we get scared.
Punching down, practicing, hitting below my knees, and a lot of speed.
He warming up.
We're
now.
sparring.
That's what we need.
We're sparring.
Warm up.
Some
8-year-olds.
I got the 8-year-olds in there.
If I find out anything,
you're not looking ahead, obviously, but do you feel like that's going to be the last option for Gervonta? Just retiring, you're not going to get that, and what would it be next?
I mean, I'm not personally worried about that. We moved on. So, if it comes, it's a big if. Like the rematch was a big if.
Lamont Roach's first remark sets the tone for the entire conversation. Detached, composed, and forward-looking. When asked about whether Gervonta Davis's next step might be retirement, Roach brushes off the speculation with quiet confidence. His words reveal a fighter who's mentally already moved on from the uncertainty surrounding Davis. The subtext here is crucial. Roach isn't chasing Tank anymore. He's implying that his own career momentum no longer depends on the whims of Gervonta's choices. That subtle detachment, saying the rematch was always a big if, communicates both maturity and frustration. It's like he's reminding the public that the sport doesn't revolve around one superstar's decisions. Roach's focus is the grind, the camp, the constant push forward. And in that single response, he transforms from being viewed as Tank's past opponent into a man carving his own path, a tone that perfectly explains why he's now training alongside Jake Paul, a fighter who also refuses to wait for anyone's approval.
The big question here is, that rematch versus Gervonta. All that kept on going back and forth. It was supposed to happen in August. It didn't happen. Then now his exhibition fight. So where's that slate leave us right now? You think we're going to get that rematch fight versus Gervonta after this fight?
Who knows? He said he's retiring. I believe him. Honestly, I think he's scared. So if he's going to retire, I believe he's going to retire.
You think you'll retire after the exhibition match?
I think so.
Why do you say that?
Because we get scared.
Roach's second statement brings an edge and maybe a little fire. He doesn't just question if Tank will retire, he questions why. The idea that Gervonta Davis might be scared signals how fractured that respect between rivals has become. To call a pound-for-pound elite fighter afraid isn't just banter, it's psychological warfare. What Roach is suggesting here isn't necessarily literal fear. It's the fear of risk, of losing the aura. After so many delays, exhibition talks, and postponed bouts, he's calling out the avoidance of real challenges. When Roach says he believes Tank might actually retire, he's exposing the emotional fatigue of constantly waiting for fights that never happen. It's the frustration of the modern boxing scene. Too much negotiation, too many politics, not enough fighting. And yet, beneath the jab, there's a smirk because Roach knows his own journey hasn't stopped. Training with Jake Paul becomes symbolic of that evolution, leaving behind the traditional path to forge a new one where exposure, opportunity, and readiness matter more than waiting for a golden ticket from Tank Davis.
Punching down, practicing, hitting below my knees, and a lot of speed.
He warming up.
We're
now.
sparring.
That's what we need.
We're sparring.
Warm up.
Some
I know
8-year-olds. I got the 8-year-olds in there.
If I find out anything,
now the focus shifts to Jake Paul, whose camp preparation sounds unconventional, even chaotic. He talks about punching below the knees, warming up endlessly, sparring constantly. It's less about technical explanation and more about a relentless, raw energy. That chaotic rhythm reflects Jake's identity, a disruptor who doesn't follow the boxing textbook. He's blending athletic innovation with influencer grit. To outsiders, it sounds unserious. To insiders, it's a glimpse into his experimental approach. Anything, if I find out anything, he says, revealing a mindset obsessed with constant discovery, adaptation, and surprise. This isn't a man who wants to look traditional. It's someone determined to evolve his own system. Roach's presence in this atmosphere is strategic, aligning himself with a fighter who's both hated and respected for breaking boxing norms. It's a merging of discipline and rebellion. The polished fundamentals of a technician like Roach colliding with Jake's viral, explosive unpredictability. Together, they represent two halves of modern boxing, tradition and transformation, training under one roof.
Champ, what's the deal?
Yeah.
Well, you got a lot of animosity toward me. But you want to know what's crazy, Tank? Me and you ain't never had a bad day up under the sun.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is. Listen, I see you, somebody that's bust his ass. I've been watching you since you was a kid, right?
Then comes the tension between Gervonta Davis and a reporter. A brief but revealing exchange that tells us a lot about Tank's current state of mind. When confronted with the journalist's comments, Davis reacts defensively but also emotionally, acknowledging a strange animosity that's surfaced between him and the media. He reminds everyone that, once upon a time, there was no bad blood, that the hostility came out of nowhere. It's a human moment, frustration, confusion, and pride all mixing together. Gervonta's body language and tone suggest he feels misunderstood, maybe even targeted. For a man who's been under the spotlight since his teenage years, the weight of public scrutiny has clearly started to sting. And this is important because when a fighter starts battling the narrative more than the opponent, it hints at distraction. While Roach and Jake are grinding in the gym, Tank seems to be fighting ghosts, critics, journalists, doubters. The mental game, at this point, may be just as brutal as any physical one.
You know, it's an entertaining fight. To be honest, Jake Paul has a lot of followings, a lot of guys that are going to come and watch, and that gives the opportunity for other fighters to be seen on those cards, you know. So a lot of people don't agree, but at the end of the day, for me, it's entertainment.
Enter Jose Benavidez, offering a grounded perspective that reframes the chaos. His take on Jake Paul's fights cuts through the controversy. At the end of the day, it's entertainment, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Benavidez acknowledges that while purists may roll their eyes at Jake's rise, his massive audience draws attention to the sport in ways traditional boxing hasn't managed in years. His argument is almost utilitarian. Jake's fame gives undercard fighters visibility, creates opportunity, and pulls millions of eyes toward the ring. That, in Benavidez's view, is progress. By calling the Jake Paul-driven spectacle entertaining, he isn't dismissing it. He's validating its role in keeping boxing alive. This quote shifts the narrative tone. It's not just about legacy and fear anymore. It's about evolution and exposure. And for Lamont Roach, training in that orbit isn't desperation. It's smart branding. He's adapting to where boxing actually is, not where it used to be.
And if we can take boxing to the next level and give other fighters opportunities to be displayed and for other people, YouTubers and all that, to be seen, and hopefully all the YouTubers and people there are just there, not just for boxing.
In his follow-up, Benavidez expands his perspective, and it's almost prophetic. He talks about taking boxing to the next level, bridging traditional fighters and new age influencers. The message is that boxing can no longer exist in isolation. It has to merge with broader entertainment to survive. He envisions a stage where YouTubers, crossover athletes, and genuine champions coexist, not in rivalry, but in synergy. This is precisely the world that Jake Paul and Lamont Roach are experimenting in right now. By training together, they're validating Benavidez's vision. A hybrid boxing culture where exposure and legacy aren't enemies, but allies. It's a controversial idea, but undeniably modern. And as purists grumble, the reality is that millions are tuning in. The sport is changing, and these collaborations are the first signs of that transformation. This section naturally sets the stage for the coming storm, as experts and fighters across the boxing world begin weighing in on what Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis really means.
YouTuber. That's
You say what?
You went to working with a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So now you're working with a YouTuber, right?
Shit, I mean,
You're forgetting to realize that I will be the first boxer and promoter ever in the Hall of Fame for multiple reasons. Like
When Gervonta Davis responds to the idea of Lamont Roach working with Jake Paul, his tone drips with condescension. But behind that insult lies insecurity. Tank mocks the transition from a Hall of Famer to a YouTuber, implying that Lamont has downgraded his pedigree by associating with Jake. But what Gervonta doesn't realize is that his words expose a defensive posture, not dominance. He wants to remind everyone of his own legacy, his journey from the streets of Baltimore to global stardom. But his statement unintentionally reveals that Jake's growing legitimacy bothers him. When he insists that he'll be the first boxer and promoter ever in the Hall of Fame, it's both a boast and a shield, deflecting the rising influence of the YouTube era. In this clash of cultures, old guard versus new wave, Tank positions himself as a purist, but the sport around him is evolving without his permission. Lamont Roach's partnership with Jake isn't rebellion, it's foresight. Davis's jab about working with a YouTuber is rooted in fear that the definition of greatness might be shifting right beneath his feet.
We definitely were ready. 140 wouldn't have been too big of a jump because I'm not a small guy, and I think I showed that in my last fight. But we was ready, and that's the kind of fight that, like I said, I'm trying to achieve my goals as well in boxing, to be one of the best fighters in the world. So if I move up and beat a champion in Pitbull Cruz, then that's only a testament to.
Roach doubles down on that theme when he talks about being ready for 140 pounds, a move that many fighters hesitate to make. Here, he's making a statement of identity. He's not a small guy, and he's not afraid to test himself at higher weights. The confidence in his voice is measured but unwavering, rooted in self-belief rather than bravado. He frames the decision to face someone like Pitbull Cruz not as desperation, but as ambition, part of his pursuit to be among the best fighters in the world. Every word reinforces his hunger for validation through challenge, not comfort. In a sport where many chase fame, Roach is chasing legacy. And in aligning himself with Jake Paul's camp, he's amplifying that ambition with exposure and momentum. This section shows that Roach isn't merely reacting to opportunities, he's creating them. Whether it's a weight jump, a new partnership, or a controversial camp alliance, he's carving his name into conversations that matter. It's not about size or division, it's about progression. And that's what separates the dreamers from the doers in boxing's unforgiving hierarchy.
about
What
does he have to do with this?
Let anything, you know what I'm talking about. Let anything. No, I don't have to say it right now. Don't worry about it. I don't got to say it up here. Let anything happen. And I'm going to show you and him. Bet.
Then comes Gervonta Davis again, and this time, his frustration boils over. His cryptic outburst, "Let anything happen and I'ma show you," in him, sounds less like a confident champion and more like a man cornered by his own anger. It's raw emotion, unfiltered and impulsive. And that volatility says everything about where Tank's headspace might be. Instead of composure, there's tension. Instead of focus, there's defensiveness. He's speaking as if his pride has been bruised by the idea of Roach training with Jake Paul. This isn't about fights anymore. It's about control. When Tank says, "Let anything happen," it's a veiled threat, a reminder of his power and dominance in the ring. But it's also symbolic. He's trying to reassert authority over a narrative that's slipping away from him. Roach's calm confidence and Jake's unorthodox rise both challenge Tank's monopoly on attention. So this quote becomes a snapshot of the emotional storm inside Davis. A champion who feels disrespected, yet unsure how to handle a new era that refuses to bow to him. His pride, once his armor, now risks becoming his weakness.
Gervonta, a lot of boxing fans aren't happy with the fact you've taken this fight rather than the Roach rematch, fights with the likes of Shakur, Devin Haney, Teofimo, etc. What do you make of that reaction? And can we still expect to see those fights?
Why should I care what they think?
In another exchange, when a reporter questions Gervonta about fan backlash, the criticism over him choosing spectacle over substance, his curt response, "Why should I care?" lands like a punch. But this time, the arrogance feels less powerful and more isolating. It's the kind of response that separates fighters from fans, when in reality, their bond is what sustains the sport. Davis's dismissal of public opinion might feel defiant, but it also reveals burnout. The endless pressure, the commentary, the social media noise, all of it has hardened him. Yet his refusal to engage with the fans' concerns marks a dangerous turning point. A fighter who stops listening risks losing the very crowd that built him. Meanwhile, Jake Paul thrives because he engages. He builds his brand by feeding off audience reaction, good or bad. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Gervonta withdrawing into silence, while Jake weaponizes attention into influence. In this tension, boxing's cultural shift becomes clear. The sport's old kings guard their thrones while the new ones dance with the crowd. Davis's "Why should I care?" might sound tough, but it's really the sound of a fighter out of tune with the world he once ruled.
When y'all switch somebody can have a bad day and y'all switching on who y'all favorite fighter is or who this person is supposed to fight. Like y'all need to sit back and be fans and just enjoy the sport.
And when Gervonta continues, criticizing fans for switching their loyalties, the emotional fatigue deepens. He's venting the frustration of a man tired of the fickleness of fame. One week, he's everyone's hero. The next, he's the villain. Yet his plea, just sit back and enjoy the sport, hints at a deeper truth. Tank still wants love from the crowd, even as he pretends not to. He's craving simplicity in a world that's moved far beyond it. The boxing audience today doesn't just watch. They analyze, react, and shape narratives. Jake Paul understands that perfectly. He gives fans a story to follow, not just a fight to see. That's why Davis's message feels disconnected. In trying to distance himself from the chaos, he's unintentionally isolating himself from the ecosystem that fuels his fame. Meanwhile, Lamont Roach, by immersing himself in Jake's modernized training world, is learning how to thrive within it. The juxtaposition is striking. Davis, once the sports rebel, is now its traditionalist, and Jake, the outsider, is redefining rebellion itself. That's the crossroads boxing finds itself at today, and the fight between them will be more than physical. It'll be philosophical.
40 pounds, 50 pounds to Jake. Considering he's much bigger, is this one of the biggest challenges of your career? Do you feel?
I can't say right now. I ain't been in the ring with him. You know?
When Gervonta Davis is asked about giving up 40 to 50 pounds to Jake Paul, his response is cautious, almost evasive. I can't say right now. I ain't been in the ring with him. For the first time in this saga, Tank sounds uncertain. Usually brash and bulletproof, Davis reveals hesitation, the kind that only surfaces when a fighter faces the unknown. The weight gap isn't just physical, it's psychological. Jake represents a new archetype of opponent. Unpredictable, unorthodox, and unafraid. Tank, a naturally smaller man who dominates at lightweight, now steps into an experiment where strength and size may neutralize his explosiveness. His answer, brief yet telling, shows that he's thinking, calculating, and maybe even doubting. Boxing purists may interpret this as humility, but to the average fan, it sounds like unease. This is not a matchup he controls. It's one he's adjusting to, and that realization alone shifts the narrative. For once, the confident knockout artist finds himself studying instead of asserting. It's not weakness. It's the beginning of an internal war between pride and practicality.
Is this the biggest, toughest challenge of your career?
Yeah, 100%. This is a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. You know, there's been a lot of criticism on fight a pro boxer, fight someone your age, all this stuff. And Tank has stepped up to the plate. He said it in a podcast. He said,
Jake Paul, in contrast, sounds invigorated. When he calls this 100% the toughest challenge of his career, there's no irony, just excitement. For years, critics accused Jake of cherry-picking opponents, fighting older or smaller men. Now, facing a pound-for-pound elite like Gervonta Davis, he's flipping that criticism into fuel. He acknowledges the magnitude of the task, and the opportunity it carries. This quote marks a subtle evolution in Jake's identity. He's no longer just the YouTuber who boxes. He's the boxer who happens to be from YouTube. There's humility in his tone, but also conviction. He's finally stepping into the ring with someone whose skill, speed, and pedigree dwarf his own resume. Yet that's exactly why it matters. Jake isn't chasing comfort. He's chasing validation. By calling Tank a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter, Jake is giving respect while simultaneously daring the impossible. And that balance between acknowledgement and audacity is what makes him dangerous. He's not fighting to prove the haters wrong anymore. He's fighting to prove himself right.
I'm the guy. I'm the guy to beat him, for him to fight a pro boxer, for him to fight someone his own age. So here we are. This is definitely the toughest test.
Jake continues, reaffirming that this fight fulfills the challenge critics have been throwing at him for years. Fight a pro boxer. Fight someone your own age. In doing so, he exposes the cyclical irony of fame. Every time he's done what the public demanded, the narrative shifts again. But this time, there's no more hiding. Here we are, he says, a statement layered with both defiance and satisfaction. It's a declaration that the experiment has become reality. Facing Gervonta Davis isn't just about testing his skills. It's about testing the entire concept of whether celebrity boxing can coexist with professional legitimacy. And as he reminds fans that Tank himself said he was the guy to beat, Jake subtly flips the power dynamic. It's not just Jake chasing Tank. Tank, by acknowledging him, has legitimized the chase. The game of perception has turned full circle. Whether you love him or loathe him, Jake has forced the sport to take him seriously. And now, with Lamont Roach training alongside him, that legitimacy deepens. Jake Paul is no longer asking for a seat at the table. He's building his own.
Jake, Chris here with Boxing with Chris. Jake, when I spoke to you in March at the Tank Roach, you seemed disappointed, seemed that this fight was not going to happen. How were the terms revisited and how are we here today?
The next moment shifts the energy entirely. When Jake is asked how the fight came together after earlier disappointment, his calm answer, "We just made it happen," reflect a professionalism that's often overlooked. Behind a viral persona is a businessman who understands leverage. His acknowledgement of negotiations back and forth and all parties being aligned demonstrates that this was no publicity stunt. It was deliberate, organized, and strategic. Jake's ability to navigate boxing's notoriously complex political landscape speaks volumes. This is a man who built a promotion company from scratch, who has his own fighter roster, and who now shares training space with elite boxers like Roach.
I mean, negotiations back and forth, all parties being aligned, and, this is...
His response underscores something most fans miss. Jake Paul isn't waiting for handouts. He's architecting his own career with precision. It's the maturity of a man who's learned from chaos, not drowned in it. And the way he says, "We just made it happen," mirrors Lamont Roach's mindset perfectly. Two fighters who've stopped waiting for permission and started taking control of their narratives. Together, they're redefining how modern athletes create opportunity in a sport stuck in its own tradition.
You don't mind getting his ass whooped because ultimately it's about like being in the ring with him, right? That's the main thing. He want to be able to say, "Look what I've done in the last 4 years, 5 years, or 5 years in boxing. I got to the top. I fought the best fighter in the world, pound for pound, Canelo Alvarez or Anthony Joshua, heavyweight champ." That's just it. That's all he wants.
Now, Timothy Bradley enters the conversation, a seasoned voice of reason, and his analysis cuts straight to the core. He frames Jake Paul's ambition not as delusion, but as desire for validation. Bradley understands the psychology of fighters who need to be in the ring with greatness. His comment sheds light on Jake's deeper motivation, legacy through experience. It's not just about the money or attention. It's about being able to say, "I shared the ring with the best." Bradley, a former world champion himself, knows that every fighter, regardless of fame, craves that proving moment. And in his tone, there's a hint of reluctant respect. He recognizes Jake's hunger as something pure, even if unconventional. Jake wants to measure himself against the sport's giants, not necessarily to beat them, but to belong among them. It's a psychological truth that separates performers from competitors. Bradley's insight reframes Jake Paul's journey, not as a circus act, but as a search for legitimacy in a world that doesn't easily forgive outsiders.
He looking for clout, man. That's it, clout at the end of the day. He know he can't beat none of those dudes.
But if he stepped in the ring with an Anthony Joshua, all jokes aside, would you from the outside looking in a former fighter, you know how dangerous this is.
The Bradley's follow-up, however, delivers a cold dose of realism. He bluntly labels Jake's pursuit as clout chasing, implying that Paul's motives might still be driven more by fame than by competitive purity. His perspective exposes the split opinion in the boxing community between those who see Jake as evolution and those who see him as intrusion. Bradley's skepticism isn't rooted in hate but experience. He's been in rings where reputation means life or death, and he knows the danger of stepping into deep waters unprepared. His warning about Jake's fantasy of facing heavyweights like Joshua or Canelo isn't mockery, it's concern. He's reminding fans that boxing is not a game of impressions, but consequences. For Bradley, Jake's ambition may be admirable, but ambition without awareness can be fatal. And that tension, admiration versus doubt, mirrors the global discourse surrounding Jake Paul. He's either the sport's savior or its sideshow, depending on who you ask. But even in Bradley's criticism, there's a subtle acknowledgement. Jake Paul has forced real fighters to talk about him seriously. That, in itself, is victory.
Jake Paul versus Tank Davis, they just announced the fight. What's your instant reaction to that?
I don't have no reaction. You know, I don't know what's going to happen with a 135-pounder going up against a 200-pounder.
Then comes Terrence "Bud" Crawford, and his take is blunt, surgical, and brutally honest. When asked about Jake versus Tank, he simply says he has no reaction. That absence of emotion is its own statement. Crawford, a fighter's fighter, doesn't even consider it real. His reasoning is rooted in physics and fundamentals. A 135-pound man cannot realistically compete with a 200-pound one.
I think it's not a real fight.
In Crawford's world, weight classes exist for a reason. They are the boundary between spectacle and sport. When he says it's not a real fight, he's defending boxing's structural integrity. And yet his next lines, that Jake's size alone could decide the outcome, reveal a fascinating paradox. Even while dismissing the matchup, Crawford acknowledges that sheer physicality makes it dangerous.
Jake just too big. He too big. If they really go at it, he's just too big. Tank ain't gonna be able to get in from that jab. Jake land one good punch on Tank, it's over with.
His words highlight the absurd yet intriguing balance that makes this fight so magnetic. Fans know it's a mismatch, but they can't look away. And that's where Jake Paul thrives, in the gray area between impossible and irresistible. Crawford might not buy into the hype, but his commentary gives it legitimacy simply by existing. And caught between these worlds is Lamont Roach, a man who isn't choosing sides, but rewriting survival itself. His decision to train with Jake's team isn't betrayal. It's strategy. It's adaptation. It's what smart fighters do when the rules start changing faster than the punches can land. Because in today's boxing world, relevance is the new power punch.